The cyclical nature of this fan base not being allowed to have nice things continues. Faithful Laremy Tunsil is out for the year. Brandon Coleman, come on down. You are the left tackle for the 2026 season. And you are allowed to feel down about this news. We do not have to spin some advanced analytics narrative in our heads trying to talk ourselves out of how big a loss this actually is. But ultimately, football still has to be played, and we have a real season starting soon. So let's talk about it honestly. First things first. Yes, football will still be played this fall. Nobody is telling you to throw in the towel on this season. But you are lying to yourself if you are pretending that losing one of the best players in this entire league, at one of the most important positions in this sport, is not a genuinely big deal. Everybody copes with bad news differently, and I get that. But pretending we are simply going to get Tunsil-level play out of Brandon Coleman or whoever else steps into that role, you are fooling yourself if you actually believe that. Can Coleman, or whoever ultimately fills that void, do a fine enough job to still win football games? Yes, this exact roster made it to the NFC Championship game back in 2024, and nobody would call that offensive line stellar. Next man up is not just a tired cliche in this sport, it is a real, functioning part of how football actually works. So Brandon Coleman, Josh Connerly Jr., it is time to put the big boy pants on. You have both been working alongside Tunsil all offseason, and I have genuinely seen Coleman do this job before. I watched him hold Myles Garrett and Trey Hendrickson to genuinely quiet stat sheets back in 2024. But my brain also remembers exactly why he ultimately got moved to guard in the first place. When a true speed rusher lined up across from him, it occasionally got ugly in a hurry. That was 2 years ago now, so plenty can change, but that specific memory is fair context worth holding on to here. Now let's talk about exactly what the actual numbers say about Coleman, because they are worth knowing. According to Pro Football Focus, across 390 total snaps last season, Coleman allowed 11 pressures and just a single quarterback hit, did not surrender a single sack, and earned a 64.6 overall grade. That is a genuinely respectable floor for a player stepping back into a starting tackle role. He made 20 total starts between the regular season and playoffs last year, 18 of them specifically at left tackle, filling in for Tunsil during the final 3 games of the season after beginning the year at left guard, where he was actually benched in favor of Chris Paul around week 3 before eventually reclaiming that tackle role. According to respected offensive line analyst Brandon Thorne, Coleman has genuinely looked more comfortable playing tackle dating all the way back to his college days at TCU, and the belief from outside evaluators is that a lack of real opportunity, not a lack of ability, has been the bigger obstacle standing between him and consistent success at that position in Washington. So what other outside options actually exist right now if this front office wanted to explore bringing in additional competition or insurance? I want to correct something here, because I got this wrong initially too. I thought veteran tackle Cornelius Lucas, who played such a key role rotating with Coleman back in 2024, was still sitting out there as a free agent. He is not. Lucas actually signed with the Cleveland Browns on a 2-year deal worth up to $10 million, so running back that exact same tandem is simply not an option anymore. That leaves a genuinely short list of realistic names still available on the open market, and the one that keeps picking up real steam is former Detroit Lions Pro Bowler Taylor Decker. Decker actually requested his own release from Detroit this offseason after the two sides could not find common ground on a new deal, and he brings real, extensive experience to the table. 140 career starts across 10 NFL seasons. He also has real, existing ties to this coaching staff, having previously worked with offensive coordinator David Blow and other current Washington staffers back during his time in Detroit. Multiple reports have already indicated Washington is seriously in play for Decker, even as the presumed plan right now remains to simply roll with Coleman as the full-time starter. Personally, I would not be mad in the slightest if this front office decided to bring in a player like Decker anyway, purely as competition or genuine insurance. You are never going to fully replicate an elite left tackle like Tunsil by stacking up a handful of lesser options. But you absolutely can meaningfully shore up this position to make sure Jayden Daniels' blind side stays properly protected. Now, let's address the blame game happening across social media right now, because it needs to stop. There are essentially three groups of people trying to assign blame here, and all three are wrong. Some people are blaming Tunsil himself, acting like it is somehow his fault he got hurt immediately after signing a big extension. Some people are blaming Odafe Owe as if he intentionally targeted our left tackle on purpose. If you have ever actually played organized football at any level, pee-wee, middle school, high school, you would understand how absurd that take is. This was a prized free agent pass rusher going up against a legitimate top 5 left tackle in this entire league in a completely normal one-on-one pass rush rep. When two of the strongest, fastest, most explosive players on this entire roster collide at full speed, injuries can happen. That is simply the nature of this sport. Blaming Owe for giving a clean, hard rep to Tunsil is not a serious take. And the third group, blaming Dan Quinn for running more physical practices this year, needs to pick a lane. You cannot simultaneously complain that last year's camp felt too soft and then get upset when this coaching staff genuinely turned up the intensity this offseason. This was a completely normal one-on-one rep. Owe was rushing, Tunsil was kick-sliding and locking his hands onto the target exactly like he is supposed to. This is simply what these players do every single day at their job. It is not Tunsil's fault, it is not Owe's fault, and it is not Dan Quinn's fault that this specific injury happened. Here is the honest truth living somewhere in the middle of all this. I think Brandon Coleman can do a fine job at left tackle, especially if this front office pairs him with some kind of additional veteran depth the way they did back in 2024. I think this team can still win real games this season. But I am not going to sit here and pretend that losing Laremy Tunsil for the year is some minor, easily replaceable loss. It is not. There is no clever statistical framing that changes that reality. This roster was drafted, developed, and paid to eventually deliver a real return on investment, and now it is genuinely time for some of these young offensive linemen to prove they belong in a much bigger role than expected. And can we talk about the sheer, brutal luck this franchise has dealt with? This fan base experienced arguably the best season in a generation back in 2024, only to watch nearly the entire roster get hit with injuries the very next year. Terry McLaurin, one of the most durable receivers in this entire league for years, held out for a new contract and then dealt with soft tissue injuries that cost him half of last season. Jayden Daniels, a player who barely missed a game throughout high school and college, missed 10 games last year. Now this. At some point, the football gods have to get off this franchise's back. But for now, feel whatever you need to feel about this news, sit with it for a day if you need to, and then get back to supporting this team. Because training camp continues Monday morning, and a real game week is right around the corner. Here is where things currently stand along this offensive line. Brandon Coleman is your starting left tackle. Chris Paul wins the starting left guard job essentially by default. Nick Allegretti, once fully healthy, remains the plan at center. Sam Cosmi anchors right guard. And Josh Connerly Jr. heads into his second season locked in at right tackle. There are real fair questions about the ceiling of this offensive line with Tunsil in the lineup. So it is fair to ask an even harder question now. What exactly is the ceiling of this room without him? Let me know down in the comments how you are feeling about this Brandon Coleman plan and whether you think this front office needs to go get Taylor Decker regardless of how camp plays out this week. Hail to the Commanders always, though. I will be locked in for every single thing that happens with this team. Talk soon.